I don't believe in the conspiracy theory that Zuck is keeping Zoom out, but you just never know, do you? Come on in, everybody. Say hello. So we're deeply honored tonight to be joined by the master himself, Ron Nichols. So for those of you who don't know Ron, Ron has been in this industry a long time, and he fill in the gaps for you as we go along the way. But there's no better person in the world to pass on sales tips in the sales room. Because I think it's fair to say, Ron, you've probably seen more photographers setups in the world than any other person. Would you say that's right?
Well, I've definitely been around. I've worked with many major studios and many small studios around the world. In my involvement with ProSelect and then the private consulting and training that I do, and so I've been in a lot of situations, and hopefully we've taught people how to make a lot of money. That's really my ultimate goal out there, is to make people successful in photography.
So before we deep dive into that wealth of knowledge you have, Ron, and just tell us how you got involved in photography first.
I'm sorry, you broke up. How did I get involved with photography? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, yeah. How did you get involved with photography first? This great industry of ours.
Well, it started out, I started out involved, as a young kid. My dad was a marketing guy, and I went on a photo shoot with him as a kid. He worked for a big engineering company. There are carols in the background to everybody. Looks like she's chasing the dogs around. um, so anyway, I got some experience there. Okay, I'm live, just so you know.
Ron, have you trained the dog how to program yet, or do anything like that? Or?
No, the dog can't program yet, but Carol just had the realization she's broadcasting to everybody live.
That's all right.
She thought we were still just on there together. Well, Carol and I were actually up at a friend's house up in northern Michigan. We came up for the weekend to enjoy all the fall color, and ended up that, I rode the motorcycle up, and so the weather got kind of bad yesterday, so I didn't want to ride in the bad weather. So we stuck around another day, and I'm heading out later this afternoon. So she's been gathering the dogs, and she came up in the car. She prefers to travel in the car and do the short rides on the motorcycle. So anyway, back to the story. So anyway, I got some experience with my dad as a marketing guy. Then I got involved with a high school yearbook and newspaper. My degree's in art. I got a degree in art, degree in graphic arts, industrial technology, and then also a degree in journalism. And so all of that combined together, took a lot of art history in college, worked in studios all through college, worked for the college newspaper. And it's all I've ever done. I mean, I've had a camera since, and my dad bought me a Minolta SRT 202 when I was in about 10th or 11th grade, high school, and been photographing ever since. Kind of thought I wanted to be a photojournalist, and I decided I didn't want to spend my Friday nights my whole life photographing high school football games. So moved into the portrait area, shot commercial for a lot of years, and then actually started photographing portraits, and really found that that's where the money was. Is I was just amazed at how much more money I could make photographing people and portraits than I was doing commercial, working for ad agencies and chasing money. So, and I've always just been involved in technology all the way through. The studios I've had, we've always tried to build them to state of the art, and I've used lots of technology all the way through. So it's been a fun career. It's interesting, and it's something that I'm always learning. I think part of my thing over the years is I've always taught. I've worked with different labs and things in terms of creating solutions and testing solutions in different manufacturers. And what I found is that, all of this, and then as I teach, I not only have to know how to do it and be successful with it, I also have to understand it and really get into the backbone of it. And that's where, I've worked on a lot of different projects, a lot of different softwares over the years, and really embrace the technology and be able to craft it so that it makes solutions for photographers. I think I have a unique advantages that I've got. I'm kind of both left-brained and right-brained, so I can not only create the art, but I also can understand the technology part of it, and I can relate to photographers. Now I work mostly with engineers. I don't write code, But these engineers, I'm able to take and convey what needs to happen, how we can take and make things happen in the sales room. What are the critical things we need to do to be able to keep the photographer and the client focused on coming to a decision? And that's really where we go into sales, is that we need to be able to get people to make a decision. The biggest thing that I see out there with photographers is that they don't give their clients an opportunity to buy, and we need to be able to set up a whole process to make that happen.
So, Ron, if we get into the sales room, then can you just, because we can learn as much as we can from what people do wrong and our failures in life as we can from our successes, right? So, what are the key things you see photographers who are trying to do in-person sales, and what's the key things they get wrong out of the start, out of the gate?
Well, I think one of the things that they fail in is that, number one, they don't give the customers the opportunity to buy. They need to be able to take and lay things out there. They also need to be able to make suggestions and be confident in making those suggestions. They need to be able to take and set up the client for a success and for a decision. What happens is that people will take and they will have people overshoot. With digital, was like the worst thing that could ever happen to the industry. It was the death of the industry. We could make as much money on a 12 exposure roll of 120 film as I could on a 2 gig card, with hundreds and hundreds of images, because people, I'm not going to say that there's limits to what people buy, but there's also realities that are out there. And so what we need to do is that we need to take and we need to be able to take and have a session where we can take and get the client and get it down to a reasonable number of images to be able to focus on what they're going to purchase. Years ago, I was doing a consulting job. I was working up in Canada for a studio, and they were a big children's photography studio. And so what they did is they had some sales staff up there, and they went and I actually sat in the back of a sales room while one of their salespeople did a session. Well, nothing makes people more nervous than having somebody else come in and watch them to evaluate. So the girl, of course, she was a little nerved up about the whole thing of going on there, but she's going through the process of editing the images with a client. And the problem is that she loved everything. She couldn't take and adequately give the client her real opinion. And that you have to have images in there that you can take and present to the client. You have to be able to honestly make a recommendation that if you like the image, don't like the image. If you don't think they need it, tell them they don't need it. You want to have things like, you need to have like controlled duplicates. Like if I know that I want people to have an image in an album or as a part of a collection or a wall grouping or something, quite often I won't just have one image of that. I may have a recommendation, but I may have one in there that I want them to take the other one out. So that definitely leaves the one. So and I used to do that a lot in weddings, when I was photographing weddings and selling, even when we were doing film, I was still selling weddings digitally in the later years. That if I would take and have a whole sequence of images, like take, for example, that if we had the bridesmaids walking down the aisle, we would photograph all those, but I had no intention of them buying them. I would always my intention was to be able to sell the whole series of images of the couples, the bridesmaid and the groomsmen coming back down the aisle when we had the two of them together. They were much stronger portraits, told a better story. So what would happen is that when we get to that series of just the bride, we'd suggest that, well, we've got all these images, or not just the bride, but just the bridesmaids. I'd say, we've made this, we've got all these images here, but my suggestion is that we take out this whole series, then we can take and add this other series in the back end. And then the brides would just say, yeah, okay, well, that sounds great. So then I could just zap those out, click a keystroke, those images would be gone. But when I got to that next set of images right there, that if there was a series of 6 images, then I would just take, boom, add them. There wasn't any discussion because we'd already talked about it. So I didn't have to go through some different things, and you can move it through. But
so I think, Ron, what you're saying is that you see a lot of photographers where they think quantity is quality when it's not.
Uh,
So they're showing way too many images, and it's just causing the client not to be able to make up their mind. So just because you have all that facility within software to pick, what they like and what they don't like and all that, do you recommend that photographers do, a pre-cull before they even get to that stage?
I think they need to do a pre-call, a medium call, and then a final call. They need to keep going through these images to bring a client in. If you're doing a portrait of a session, I was working with a big studio operation, and they were photographing. They were doing some baby portraits. And when I'm working with my consulting clients, I always want to say, okay, let's take one of your original cards, and I want to see it right from the start. What happens here? What's the process? And the first thing is that it was like over 500 images of this child and this mom. How can anybody ever make any suggestions on that? I mean, you spend a huge amount of labor time, not only yourself or your staff, depending on your setup, being able to take and cull through this, but there's no reason that you can't take and get that 500 images down to probably 30 or 40 images that you think that the client should be focusing on, because it gets to be a cap that we need to be able to get the client. It's easy to overwhelm them. I look at people that are I'll see that they'll do a post and they'll do a sales session or presentation session that's lasting 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, 3.5 hours. That's crazy. People wear out, and then they start to feel beat up at that part of the game. So one of the things that I think is the absolute key when they start out with the presentation is, one, we need to be able to explain what you're going to do, what the process is going to be. And we also need to explain what the goal of this is. We need to tell the client right up front what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through and we're going to be evaluating all your images. We're going to be picking out a series of final images. And then from those images, you're going to deciding what type of printed products you're going to be purchasing. And we'll talk more about the specific products as we get there. But our goal here in this hour-long session is to be able to narrow everything down and get you all set so that when you walk out of there, you know exactly what's going to appear in your home, what's going to appear in your image box, what's going to appear in your album, whatever the products that we ultimately decide. And that's where we're going to end up today. And my head is going just like your head is going, because when we're doing this, the clients tend to replicate that they engage with it. So that's a real key right there to get happening. Then the other thing that needs to happen is when we start the process of the editing, what I want to do is I need to be able to take and ask the client permission to give my opinion. So what I would say is, like, now, Ronan, as we go through these images, is it okay if I tell you how I feel about the images too? And do you think a client has ever told me no? Absolutely not. There's never been a situation where I would have that set up, because what that does is that the clients are going to take and they're going to have some indecision themselves. We need to be able to give them guidance. We're the professional. People always expect our opinion as a professional. I always joke for years on weddings that I never really needed the couple, the bride and groom, to pick out all the images. I could take and do all that for them, but they were just a whole lot more comfortable in the room if they're spending $10, $12, $15,000 on wedding pictures, if they're a part of the decision. So we have to do that balancing part of it. The other thing that has to happen is that I want to have my sales room set up in a situation that allows me to be able to take and engage. Well, I'm sitting here, I'm in a friend's living room right now, but this room is set up. Imagine that if I had the screen, you can see a TV screen back behind me. That one's too small. I'm a big advocate of projection. But the whole idea is I don't need to be looking at that projection screen. Okay, if you're my client, I want to be looking at you. I can control everything on my computer here. I know what's up on the screen, but I want my eye contact. I want to be able to just look to the left or the right of my screen or whatever and watch that client. So what I've got is, if I've got mom and dad are sitting there and I've got an image up the screen and I'm asking them whether or not we're going to make a decision on this image, If I see some hesitation between the two of us, or if there's a tie or whatever, because I can take and I can look them in the eye, I can watch their body language very precisely. It's, then I can jump in, be the tiebreaker, make a suggestion. And what that allows us to do is to be able to pace things very quickly. And I want to move through that editing very, very quickly. And a lot of people that they don't do it. Now, I know I'm kind of rambling on here, and you're not getting a chance to answer questions.
You've had two great tips there so far in what you see wrong in a lot of studios. So the first one is, it's quality, not quantity. So make sure you that cull till you get the 30, 40 images that you're going to move through with your client in the session. And two then is to make sure that you're focusing your clients. Don't be looking at your screen or your projection screen or your big TV, whatever you happen to use. That don't be looking at that. Make sure you're engaging with the client when you're in that sales session with them.
Exactly. One of the things, is pretty much everybody knows, that I'm involved with ProSelect, that's my main gig, and, work on the development of that one. And what's so beautiful about that is the ability that I can take, and if I was taking and working here, I can have all my controls on my screen, and my client will see none of that. They'll be looking back up at the main screen that only has the image on it. And so that they can stay focused. And so if I'm having to fumble on the screen just a little bit, they're not seeing my mouse jumping over, or a menu opening, or some indecision that I can take and control everything without them seeing it. So, but the key is I want to be fluid so that I never have to be able to be distracted by the technology. I need to utilize it, but I can't be distracted from it.
So we have a question, Ron. Jim has asked a question. Is there a benefit to outsourcing culling so it's being done by a third party without any emotional connection to the images?
Well, I think it depends on what type of jobs you're doing. I think weddings can easily be outsourced. I mean, people are doing with huge volumes of images. So I think that there's value there. But I think if you're doing a family session, I think that emotional connection is important. I really do. I think that the whole idea that anytime that we're selling photography, when our clients are purchasing the images based on emotion, that's the ultimate thing that we're working with there. And I'm emotionally involved with these clients. I've met with my clients ahead of time. We've talked about what they want to do. We're talking about where a portrait's going to be displayed. All of these different factors. And so I think the emotion is a key. Now, I think that you can take and, that I have a lot of situations where we'll have, you might have staff that would do some editing, but I'm a big believer in having the photographers take and edit their own images. And some of the studios that I've worked on consulting jobs with, that, for example, one studio, large studio operation, they're like 5-7 camera rooms, they got 7 photographers going, and the photographers were shooting madly. And then everything was going down to 1 or 2 people in an editing department that was editing everything. Well, what do you think was happening there? One, the photographers were very sloppy about what they were shooting because they had somebody down there that was going to fix it for them. Okay. Then they would take and they would overshoot because they didn't have to take and make the decisions on all the images. And I'm like, no. Everybody is going to be accountable in this whole process. So we changed the whole workflow in their situation. So the photographers have to shoot a session, they offload it, and in between sessions, they're editing all their images. And so those images need to be ready to be able to take and a good enough quality to be able to take and sell. They were shooting everything in RAW. We flipped it to shoot a JPEG and a RAW so that you can get an image that's good enough to sell. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be good enough to sell. And so that we could take and we could focus in on that, the photographer doing that. And so it kind of, everybody's accountable, and it gets it back. You get thinking at the time that you're shooting. And so if you're a one person situation, I think that's good. And I think that, to me, I can flip through my images and do the initial culling and editing pretty quickly. That makes it really easy to do.
So I think that's lesson number 3, is it? That I think what you're telling us there is that if you take responsibility for the quality of the photography, you're going to narrow the number of images that are going to be taken. So we're back to this quality over quantity thing. but you're also then, you're only sending for retouch, final retouch, the images you sell. Is that what you're telling us there? Or do you believe that you should send the images for retouch prior to selling?
No, I'm a big advocate of being able to take and that I want to do the minimal work on the front end and I want to backload my workflow. And my backloaded workflow is going to all be strictly based on sales. And so that I'm not putting a bunch of time. Now I can use some automated processes for making images look better. I want to be able to take, I mean, the images need to look good. And we can take and we can do some automated things. For example, in ProSelect, we introduced the perfectly clear retouching in there. So that allows you to very quickly be able to go through and clean up some blemishes. It's not a perfect retouch, but that's okay. Because the key is what we want to express to people is that when they're making their final selections, they're picking based on pose and expression. And there's, in my opinion, there's nothing more important than focusing on that. I'm going to explain to the client that what I want to do is as we go through these images, we're going to look at each image and you're going to give me a yes, a no, or a maybe. Then it's important that I qualify what that yes, no, and maybe is. A yes is an image that, yep, I really love that image. That's something I would consider owning. A maybe image is one, you know what, it's nice, but it's not really a top priority image. And a no is a image that is strictly that I'm not interested in. And I want to have yes, maybe, and no images. And so my goal happens is that I want to be able to take and get two pools of images as I've done after I've done my initial edit with a client. I use the term edit, others use the term culling, you know, a little bit of, but edit is the process, in my mind, is the process of sorting down the images. So my yes images are the primary images, the images for the primary sale. They're going to be the ones that are going to be the ones I'm going to use for my wall portraits, any primary images, gift portraits, those things like that are going to be, they're going to be my foundational images for the sale. Then I'm going to have a set of maybe images. Now my maybe images are going to be ones that are going to use to be able to take and build secondary products or flush things out. So now the process is as I'm going through and doing the editing on the images, we're going to go through the images and we're going to bring up one image at a time. And I'm going to start out with all my images into a maybe group. And I'm going to look at my images and I'm going to have the client give me a yes, a no, or a maybe. And what happens is we have to keep the client focused on this one because they're going to look at the image and I'm going to say, now keep in mind, what you're going to see is everything's not perfect on this image yet. Your finished portrait will look like the beautiful images that you see displayed around you, you know, here in the studio. So just focus on pose and expression, a yes, no, and a maybe. And I've already qualified that. I've also already asked them my permission to give them my opinion. So we're stepping through there. So we go through each image and then the yes, no, or maybe. Where I think a lot of photographers fail is they'll start out and they go into a comparison mode. They want to start comparing images. Well, what happens is when you get into a comparison mode, I think we're dealing with an analytical type of mindset as opposed to an emotional mindset. Okay, when I'm looking at one image up there, I can take and I can think, I love this image. I don't love this image. I mean, I want to make a decision whether or not I'm going to be attached to that image. When I put two images up on the screen, then what happens is then I'm starting to nitpick. Okay. It gets me into an analytical mode and it moves the client away from that emotional aspect into a process of being able to try and find something wrong to be able to eliminate images. Now we are going to use a comparison, but it's going to be later and I'm going to be in total control of that. So what will happen is that the client will go through and I'm going to tell them yes, no, or maybe. And, you know, it might take them a little bit to get them going through this. And you might get the maybes on the one. The client gives a maybe and I think it's a yes. I'm going to tell them, you know, I really love this image. I think this is a yes. This might be something that I may have a few images that I've tagged with a favorites flag right in the software. You know, that's the key of having a regular IPS software. You know, something that's built for it, you know, and that's what ProSelect is built for, is to be able to have things so that you can work quickly and do that process. I can't do those things in Lightroom. You can make a presentation in Lightroom, but I can assure you, you can't sell like what I can do in ProSelect. Actually, I don't think you can sell with anything like you can with ProSelect out there. But I'm going to go through these images, the yes, no, and maybe. Every once in a while, you get a client who'll say, oh, you know what? I like this one better than the last one. And I'm going to say, that's fine. That's good. We're just going to leave it in there for now and we're going to move on. But the key is I want to move them through this process. I'm going to get them through. We're not going to compare anything. We're not going to be going backwards. We're not going to do anything. We're going to create two piles of images, our yes and our maybes. My no's will not even get looked at again. There's even a good possibility that our maybes may not even get looked at again if we're doing it right. So that process is so critical. I mean, if people would embrace that process, they would increase their sales by thousands of dollars. I've had it happen. I've had it happen all over the world.
So Ron, is there a metric for, let's say I have 30 images, right, that we talked about, 30 to 40 images. So let's just pick a number of 30. And if I have 30 images, how many would you want the client to say yes to? Is there a metric, an ideal metric you would aim for?
Well, it's going to depend on the type of product that we're dealing with. Now, if I'm dealing with a family, okay, I'm probably going to have less images. My goal on a family is I'm going to have, I want to be able to take and sell a large wall portrait or a large grouping, okay? And so that grouping is typically going to be, maybe 1 to 5 images, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we're going to focus down, more. I want to make sure that I've got enough to be able to take and fulfill that. Now, if I photograph that family, is more storybook type things, and then I can take and I can have some images as far as, to be able to flush out an image box, for example. So maybe I've got 12 images in an image box or 15 images in an image box. I can take and I can pull some from that maybe group. And so I would have some. So if I had, for example, say that I had 8 or 9 images in a yes group out of 35 or 40 that I show the client from a family session, my primary focus is going to be on selling those 5 or so images for my large wall portraits. That's my most profitable item. And I always am going to sell in the sequence of starting out with the wall portraits first, because that's where I can make the most money. And it's not only the most money from in terms of what the total cost of the product is, when I figure in my cost of sales and the time. If I get into, I can retouch one image a whole lot faster than I can retouch 20 images. So I have less production time into a single image than, when I'm doing an image box, I have to go through and do that. I mean, I love image boxes, and I know you do too, but the aspect of it is that if I can sell a wall portrait for $3,000 or an image box for $3,000, my profit is going to be higher on a wall portrait. I think we can all agree on that, that it's going to be there. But I need to be able to take and control it. There's a place for each one of these as we evolve through that sales session. So what happens is that we're going to take and, getting back to your concept there. So I'm going to take and I'm going to work on flushing out that wall grouping first. So let's say I've got 9 images left in that yes group. So I've used 5 of them that we've utilized for my wall portraits. That's the first thing I'm going to sell. Then I'm going to talk about gift portraits. These are going to be portraits that we're going to give grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles, these kind of things. These are important images, and people forget to sell them anymore. But if I can sell an 8x10 for $150, that's about $148 profit. The reality, if I've already got the image retouched, I can get that thing mounted at the lab, it cost me $10 or something, with mounting and finishing or whatever. But that becomes a highly profitable item. So I'm going to ask about that. Well, then what happens is now I've got say I've got 4 or 5 images that are left in the yes group. So now my goal is to find a solution of how the client can take and actually own those images. And this is where I can go in and do kind of what I consider frou-frou products. And the frou-frou products are going to be things like multi-image composites. They're going to be image boxes. They would be albums. And so when if I've got 4 or 5 images left in a yes group, okay, I want to do an image box. Okay, and say I want to take and pull 15 images for an image box, I'm going to start out with those 5, and then I'm going to go into that maybe group, and then I'm going to take and make some recommendations from there, and then move them in to be able to take and create a box and get something in that the client really likes. We know the client likes the maybe images. They haven't had the same level of attachment, but but it's strong enough to be able to take and move them and control that whole situation.
So, Ron, are you seeing a lot of, I don't know what term you use, but I use the term cluster. I've heard some educators use that, clusters, where a lot of people are now sending, multiple images to make up rather than one big portrait. Are you seeing much of that, or does it depend on the photographer and the market and the client?
Are you talking clusters? You mean composite images? Is that what you're thinking, as opposed to?
I'm talking about where you might have, two 1114s or four 1114s rather than a 22 by 28 or.
Yeah.
Do you see much of that, or does it really depend on the photography market? And I've seen it a lot in high school seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether it's only in high school seniors that's happening. I think Gary Box does a lot of that. If we pick a name, I think Gary was teaching on that at Sync this year.
Right.
So are you seeing much of that, or is there still a big emphasis on selling the one big portrait, or what are you seeing in the market?
Well, I think what it is that we have to be able to take and design for the space and for the client. And there's going to be some different needs on how that can actually happen. And so to answer your question, yes, I do see a lot of clusters, a lot of things happening out there. And it depends on the type of shooting that the photographer is doing. If we're going to take and do a multi-image type of composite, that I need to be able to take and have strong supporting images that are different enough to be able to tell a story, to be able to pull it all together. I need to be able to take and have these images coming into the right size. I love to have a wall grouping or a cluster that has a dominant image. And when I say a dominant image, it needs to be probably twice the size of the next smallest image in the group. That I think that's an important design consideration to look at. Then we need to take and we need to look and see what the wall space is for the client. So it's important that we take and have the client photograph their walls or go there and do it. With ProSelect, we've got this Send My Rooms where, we have a video that you can take, you can initiate an invitation to a client right from ProSelect. It'll send them, it gives them a video, it tells them how to take the images. They take them right on their phone, they directly upload them, goes right to the time exposure servers, and the photographer downloads them. And so you can take and you can build those things out. But I don't want to sell a cluster that doesn't work in a particular location. Okay. If you look over my shoulder here, okay, you can see this wall behind me. Okay, you can see it can support, there's piece of art up there. Okay, but I need to be conscious because I've got, some furniture sitting right down here. Okay, I've got lamp doing some obstruction here. So I have to be conscious of the space. This goes up into probably a 12-foot ceiling up here. I'm probably not going to likely have images up real high. So I need to be, a horizontal piece of art like what he's got in there is something that's going to tend to work well. I probably may not put a square cluster there. I also need to have images that are big enough that when I'm sitting there, if I'm sitting here, there's a sofa right behind me. So if I'm sitting there watching TV, that if I put 11 by 14s on that wall of full length images, those head sizes are really small. So I need to be able to get something so that when the client is sitting in their chair, their sofa, wherever they're going to look up and enjoy these images, that they can actually go through and enjoy the images, to be able to see the expression on their kids' faces. And this is something that we explain to the clients in the session, because I want to take and we have, whenever you're deciding on the size of a wall portrait, there's two factors that are involved. First of all, you have visual space. And the visual space is the one that deals with how does it fit within the actual final area where it's going to display. Do the colors work? Is it proportional to that area? Does it look appropriate? And then the second one is going to be actual size. And the actual size is where I need to be able to take and evaluate that image so that you can see the expression and be able to enjoy the art. A scenic photograph, we can take and look at a sunset, and really the size of the sun doesn't matter because we can get the whole idea of it. But when I've got a picture of my kids in there, I want to be able to take and see the joy and the relationships and the interaction of all these people together. So we have to do a balancing act. And this is all part of the questions that we have to ask beforehand. We're talking about it during the sales presentation, and we're evolving with it in the software. We're engaging the client as a part of the process. And that's the beautiful thing about using Room View and some of the different things that we can build up in ProSelect, because we get clients involved in the creative process. I'm still going to be in charge, mind you, but I'm going to let them think that they've got to play into it. And, and they're agreeing with things as we go through the whole part of it.
So in many ways, Ron, the photographers who can charge well for the really important work they do, they have to nearly be design consultants as well, right? But you've software that helps with that, because in ProSelect, the client can send images of their rooms in their own home. Isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely. That's critical. The design of the portraits is critical. I can't tell you over the years that I'm not in the studio at all on a daily basis anymore, but I would have clients that would come in, that they would book a family portrait session. They'd come in and their intention is always the first question that I would ask a client, and it still should be, whether it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or now, is where do you plan on displaying a portrait in your home? And quite honestly, a client has never clicked. That's never clicked with a client. And so we need to be able to take and build on this. Well, I'm just thinking about getting, I just want to get an 8x10, have something for myself and give grandma something for Christmas. Well, tell me about your home. Where do you spend most of your time? Do you have a living room, family room? We want to talk about, establish that there. Well, probably my family room is where I spend most of my time. Okay. Now, tell me a little bit about the room. Is that a casual room? Is it a formal room? What are the colors? And then what happens is we start evolving a basis by asking lots of questions. And then from there, we can start the design process. And so once I know what happens with the design, or what the type of room is, okay, if I don't want to put a real formal portrait in a very casual room. Okay, if I've got a formal dining room, maybe I'm going to put a much more formal portrait into that space. But the colors all need to work. The last thing I want to do is put an image up on the wall during the viewing session with the client look in and say, oh, that color just does not work in there. Whose fault is that? It's the photographer's fault, because they didn't take the time to actually go through and quiz the client and to be able to ask the right questions.
So Ron, I hear a lot of photographers talking, because I think it was ingenious when you came up with that, right? And the idea of being able to facilitate that process of the client sending images of their home, so that you can then build the art around the room, and the photography art around the room. But tell me this, a lot of photographers say to me, well, how do I get the client to actually do it? How do I get the client to take those images on their iPhone or their smartphone and send them to me in advance? Have you seen any good tactics that photographers use to encourage that to take place?
Well, I think you'll find the people that are using things like Send My Room that make it easy. The clients are overwhelmed by the process. Okay, that the clients, okay, we say tape up an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper on your wall. Okay, and I've seen clients send back images that they've got an 8 by 10 piece of paper, and then it shows the wall, but there's nothing else. There's nothing else for the spatial relationship in there. And so one of the things is that, when I'm explaining to the client about getting the room pictures, I'm going to tell them that this is really, really important. And what's going to happen is it's going to allow you to be able to see how finished images will look in your room. We'll be able to precisely size those images so it looks great. And based on that, we'll be able to give you the best value on your purchase for as we design this. And so it's totally helps. It kind of becomes an insurance policy. Then if we're sending things like in Send My Rooms, I want to take, and it gives them the video. It shows the client exactly what to do. It makes it easy. The people that are having trouble getting rooms are probably not the ones using Send My Rooms. They're the ones that are telling the client to take a picture and email it to me or text it to me or do all this other stuff. Because when they go into that Send My Rooms interface right on their mobile phone, they can take the picture and they click upload, and it just goes and it's done. It's something that can happen very, very quickly. So we need to stress it. The other thing that's important is we get about 3 days out from the viewing session. If we don't have the client room images, we need to get on the phone and call the client and say, Ronan, I said, I haven't got your room images yet. Is that something that you can get to me maybe by the end of the day today? Or do you need a couple more days and we should reschedule this viewing session? So what were the options there?
I had the option of you ain't going to do the sales session. I mean, I ain't seeing the images until you have the images.
That's exactly it. But there was nothing aggressive about it. It was just the reality of being able to take and tell people that boom, here is this is what we need to do. It's important, and it's your benefit to be able to take and get these images, that we want to get this so that you can see exactly what you're spending. You're making a substantial investment out there, so we need to be able to, put it out there. And
And it's been proven, Ron, in so many industries that where the client's involved in co-creation, that they've a much more, they invest so much more in the process that they're much more invested emotionally too in the process. And that's what we're trying to do, right?
exactly. Exactly. People try and they tend to limp through uh, a sales session by using, okay, people say, well, I use Bridge, I use Lightroom. And you know what? If you come from selling images online, you can take and you can actually do that. You're going to make more money. And so maybe you were making $250, a session online. And then now you take and you start getting the client in front of you and you show the images. You know what? If all of a sudden, if you're going from $250 to $750 on the one, that's great. You've tripled your sales out there. So everybody's so excited. It's like, yeah, I use Bridge and it's so great. But the question is did you really reach your potential? And did you really do that justice to your client by being able to give them the full opportunity to buy something that becomes a total designer piece and an heirloom that their family's going to love for years and years to come? That's where the question is. That's where people fall short because they don't know what they don't know. I go out and if you look on a lot of the different forums that are out there that are talking about IPS and IPS softwares out there, you'll see a ton of people, and you look at a lot of the majors out there, the big names. Most all of them are using ProSelect. It's not ProSelect is the choice of champions. I guess is really what it comes down to, because it's a full blown one. Well, you'll take and you'll have people say, well, I use Fundy, I use Shoot and Sell, I use an iOS app, I do all these different things that'll come up there, and they're like, yeah, I do great with all this stuff. Okay, but have you ever taken and compared it to something else? Have you ever compared it to a real solution? We used to be pretty much about the only game in town when all this started, because ProSelect goes back about 15 years. Well, there's been a lot of other people that have come into the market. And so, we initially lost people out there. But what we found is that people have been coming back because they realize that they can't get the sales because they can't take in that other software. In ProSelect, I can take and we can design a wall portrait. Okay. I can show that room image. I can project it. I can click a button and I can show that image actual size. So I can flip from how it looks into a room. I can do a close up of the room, or I can take and show the image actual size so they can evaluate the head size. Can I see it from this particular area? Then I can go through and maybe I want to take and I want to order some gift portraits. I want to do a gallery wrap with a custom edge. We can go through and we can do that. Then maybe I want to take and do a composite layout that has 3 or 4 images in it. So we can put that together. Then we can go through and say, you know what, I'd love to do an image box. So we can click on the thing, click our little 3XM one. There's some couple of your image boxes right in there in default right now. They can bring that up, drop an image in there. Then we can take and have a whole group of 15 images for an image box. I can drag that into the mats and it'll populate every one of the mats there. It'll account for the mat overlap. So when you print those images, you will know exactly how much of that is hidden behind there. So the images are precisely printed the correct way. For the box, it's the holiday season. I want to take and do a greeting card. I can do that right there. I can bring the client into it for that. I can take and I can do an ornament. I can take and I can do jewelry. ProSelect is the only game out there that can show all these products. And when I start adding, $50 here, $100 here, $200 here, $1,000 here, that's where those numbers come about. And that sales sequence is so important when we go through this, because we need to take and we need to sell that wall portrait first, the wall portrait or the wall gallery first. So we're going to go through and show that first. Do that. Then the question that we're going to ask is, can I show you this wall portrait or maybe some other selections for your office, your husband's office, or maybe someplace else in your home. It's a fishing expedition. But if you don't ask a question, there will be nothing that will evolve anything else. One day we did a beautiful wall portrait or grouping. I don't remember what it was for a client. And then I asked the client, I said, what about something for your office or your husband's office? And she's like, oh yeah, well, let me see this other one. And I'm like, okay. So when we got that, and she's like, you know what? I really like that. She said, let's do another 220 by 24s for each of our offices. Bingo. Okay. It didn't take any time. I didn't have to show anything. I mean, I popped the image up on the screen, but the client knew exactly because we'd been through the process, and I asked a question. So all of a sudden, that added another, $1,500 or whatever the sale, because I asked that one question. Then the next thing we do, once we've convinced that we've gone through all of our options on the wall portraits, and you get them to commit, we commit in steps. Okay. So when I get commit, that means I'm adding it to the shopping cart. I'm actually putting it right in ProSelect. I'm building up an invoice all right at that time. Then we're going to go on to gift portraits. The gift portraits are going to be the ones for grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles. We're going to talk about upcoming holidays, having those ready to go, all those. So we're going to sell all the gift portraits because, again, a highly profitable type of item. Then the last thing I'm going to do is my multi-image products, because this allows me the opportunity to be able to take and use all these other images that I have left, create products right along with them, get them to take ownership at this point, and then sell them. I don't want to do a composite product. If I've got an area up there on that wall where I've got these silver images back here now, if I do a composite that's got 3 11 by 14s, into a composite layout, that piece of wall real estate is gone. If I sell the composites first, I want to be able to take and sell the wall portrait for back there. Then I could take and go to another wall. I might go to another wall over here where I've only got 3.5 feet between a sliding door and a window. I can take my composite, I can turn it into a vertical one. So now I can take and I can put that same product that was over there that was taking up 6 foot of space, I can now put it in the 3.5 foot of space over here. So we have to be conscious of the real estate, of how that's going to go. So again, we have to be in control of that whole situation there to just guide the customer through. And then if we're at the end of the sale, that we could take, that if we created that composite product for them, then what I can do, once I know that I've created the product and that I'm going to have to retouch it, my images are retouched, my product's created, I've built that all right up in ProSelect. I can say, what would you think about, would grandma be interested in one of these? What I can do is I can do a second one of these for half price for you. All right. So now at this point, all my work is done. I can take and I can increase the order, because I'm not devaluing my product, but I'm offering them a benefit. And I would only do this if I've got a certain level. The photographers, they go through, and what I see is that they make the mistake of going through and selling a bunch of the secondary products first. Then it's very hard to get back to the wall portraits, okay? Because the client already owns the images, okay? Once the client owns it, it's game over, it's there. So if we get it back into the primary ones for the wall portraits, I always want to work in terms of profitability, that I'm going to work down the list and increase it. And all I can tell you is that this formula works. I have put it in studios that I've done consulting work with across the country. That I had one that studio I worked with several years ago, and they were telling me that they were getting about $3,000 orders. Great orders. Everybody's pretty happy with that. I'm driving down the road one day. I get a call on my cell phone from the guy that owns the studio. He said, I gotta tell you, he said, this is crazy. He said, the only thing we changed is we put in that process, the one that I just told you about, wall portraits, gift portraits, secondary products. Okay. And he said, we started selling like that. He says, consistently now, everything's between $5,000 and $7,000. We just made that one change, and that made that much of a difference in our sales.
And I think it's such great tips you're doing there, Ron. It's gold. And the reason why is, like I see it, a lot of photographers, they sell for the wall and they forget about those secondary products, and they forget about the psychology of the makeup of today's consumer. Like if you take Gen Y and Gen Z, they're used to quantity of images as well. So by doing that, not only are you setting the quality for the wall, but you're also giving them a quantity of quality images that come afterwards, and they're automatically programmed now for that. They're going around taking selfies every day. They're looking for quality image to put on Instagram and to put on Snapchat and to put on TikTok and all these platforms. So I think that's a great tip, and it is a way to increase the sale. And the other thing I think you've said is you keep going till the client says, I'm done, right? Often in a scenario, we stop ourselves because we think, oh no, they've definitely spent enough now.
Mm-hmm.
But the only one who can really judge that is the client, right?
Right. Yeah. Something else that I think is important in the process, I'm kind of looking at time here. I guess we're doing okay.
We're okay.
Um,
We're 10 minutes.
Okay. Is that I think that when I'm working with a client in the sales room, we've kind of gotten a little bit out of sequence on some things here. But what happens is that we go through the first thing we're going to do is one, we're going to do the meet and greet, offer some refreshments, those kind of things. Then we're going to explain the complete process to the client. That explanation of the complete process is critical. I also believe in sharing prices prior to that time. Okay, I mean, giving ballparks, and if the client wants a price list, they should have a price list. I think nothing's worse than getting into the sales situation and have the client just totally blown away. If they can't afford me, you know what, I don't want to photograph them. Why spend the time and have them walk at that point in the game? So I want the client to be somewhat prepared with that. But I'm also confident in my ability to be able to sell. And you can too by following this process, because you don't have to be it's a systematic approach to sales is really what this is, and that's what I've created and what I advocate. So we're going to explain to the client what the process is going to be. Then we're going to go through and then we're going to do the editing or the culling of all the images. So we're going to get those down and we're going to go through and we're going to look at that, create that yes group, then that maybe group of images. So once we've made the first pass of all those images and they're now in the yes, maybe, and no groups, what I'm going to do is go through and I'm going to have some duplication of images in that yes group. I'll have some of the same pose. That's where I'm going to go back through and then I'm going to compare those images. And I'm only going to compare like images together, because the assumption is when I put two images up on the screen together, one of them is going to go. So I don't ever want to put two images up on the screen if I don't want one of them to go. All right. So we're going to go through and we're going to eliminate the duplicates from the yes group. Then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to flip to that maybe group and I'm going to tell the client what I want to do is I want to look at these maybe grouping images. I just want to see if there's anything that I think we missed. And I didn't say you missed, I said we missed, okay? Because I'm taking ownership of that process because they gave me permission at the beginning. So we can go through there and look at the maybe images. And so if there's some things that I know that if I've got specific products that I maybe are going to recommend that I don't have enough images for, this gives me the opportunity to take and move those up to that best group. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I'm just going to take and look at it and say, you know, boy, I just love this image. I think this is just so beautiful. Maybe this is something we could look at, you know, in a black and white or whatever, pop it up on the screen, you know, and the client will be going like this, you know, or they might think, oh, they don't like it. Fine. Then we've done it. Then we go through, once we've got our images into that yes group, then what I want to do is I'm going to take and I want to get the client up. And I'm going to go and I'm going to take and I'm going to walk them around the studio. Then I'm going to take and I'm going to show them a gallery wrap. I'm going to walk them up to a gallery wrap on the wall. I'm going to say, you can see the beautiful canvas texture. Now notice how the gallery wrap wraps around. It stands off from the wall. Now we can use it like this, or we could take and we can put it into a framed gallery wrap like you see over here. But notice a gallery wrap, it's on a stretcher frame and I go boing, 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 you know, so that one is. And I just tell them, go ahead and touch it if you want, so that they can actually see it, see how that canvas is stretched across there. Then we're going to go over and we're going to walk and maybe look at a metal print. So we're going to go over and look at a metal print. Now the metal print, you can see how this one stands off from the wall. And then we can take the metal, has a beautiful high gloss sheen to it. You know, it's kind of a real contemporary type of look. And then you can see it's on real metal. And I go ping and I thunk it, you know, and let it ping just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to show them now. This is our our standard art finish print, or this is one that's matted. So I'm going to go around there, I'm going to show them these images, but it kind of gets the client out of their seats, and then we can explain the images. Then I'm going to bring them back, and then I'll pick up an image box. I'm going to say, now this is an image box. The beautiful thing about this is how we can take, and you can store all your images here, but we can easily pull one out. We can display them here. Then we can pull out an album, what other products, show them a Christmas ornament. Then we're going to go back through, and then we're going to say, all right, let's go ahead and let's sit back down here. And then I'm going to pull out the price list, and I'm going to slide the price list in front of them. Then we're going to go through, and what I'm going to do is if I don't know at that point what is probably the strongest image for the wall portrait, I'm going to take and I'm going to just click the slideshow button of the Yes group. And I'm going to say, which of these images do you envision being displayed in your home as a wall portrait? No comparison. I'm reeling them back into an emotional point with music, self-dissolving images, so that they can pop those up on the screen, okay? And then the client, something will stick in their mind, or maybe I'll make a recommendation at that point. Then we start the process of, putting the images back into the room, doing the design, and pulling it all together from there. So we stay focused on that. We make the commitments, we add the products to the shopping cart. Then we ask about portraits for other areas of the home, or husband's office, your office, whatever. Then we move on to gift portraits, then lastly going through the other secondary products. But we're guiding them through that whole thing. And this should be able to take place in probably about an hour, maybe 90 minutes, the absolute most. But the key is that we need to be able to get those images, that whole initial process at the beginning of editing through all these images, you should be able to take, say, 120 images and get it narrowed down to that final set of images that you want to work with in probably 10 to 14 minutes, something like that. Nothing's worse than having a client go through the whole process as they get all these images and they end up with 70 images still in the Yes group because they loved all the images and the photographer didn't take control of it. And they just go, and they've been sitting there for an hour and a half and getting into that. And what do they say? They say, there is just so many beautiful images. I just can't make a decision. And where are you? You're skunked at that point.
And I think a lot of photographers, Ron, make that mistake. They don't do that pre-call and get it down to a manual number.
Yeah.
And end up, against that wall with no sale. And Ron, Jerry has a few questions for us.
Okay.
So, how do you deal with clients who request photos you didn't take? They didn't specifically request them on the day, and after the fact they want. I've noticed this especially with weddings. When guests have taken photos and the client assumes you have them too.
Well, quite honestly, I don't know if I've ever been in that situation. Because part of it is that I think we need to really work through the images for the ahead of time, to ask what the expectations are for the client. The other thing is being able to take, and the clients need to like your style and the type of work that you do. You get into a situation with a wedding, clients will tell you that they love candid images. Oh, I want candids. But I would always insist on doing a lot of portraits. I'm like, I'll take all the candids you want, but we're going to do the portraits too. What would they ultimately end up purchasing? It was the portraits. Those were the money images that would actually come out of it, and I suppose there could be a situation, where you don't have something, you just have to talk your way through it. It's like, I think what you do is you need to be able to take and reel the customer back into the position of, look at what we do have here, and be able to create a solution for the images that are there, and to diffuse it that way. I think that sometimes where you get clients that if you get clients complaining about some other things, is that really what they're complaining about? Or is there another issue? Okay, is it a money issue? Is it, is there some other factors that are involved? And that's where we have to really work in a positive attitude and migrate a client through a process.
And Jim wants to know, Ron, do you volunteer price every time they decide on a piece, even when not asked about it, or wait for the sticker shock of the total order. And I know you've talked about price already, that you educate them in advance. But,
Right.
but when they choose an actual product or an image together, do you reinforce the price at that stage, or do you wait till the end?
Okay, great question. Okay, so what I do is, and I did kind of mention this in here, but as I take is when we start that process of going through before I'm showing the wall portraits, I mentioned that I take that I have a nice price book. It's set up like a menu type of item. And what I do is I slide that to my client. I put it right out on the coffee table right in front of them. And it's laid open. And then we're going to look at this. So what happens is if I'm putting up a 40 by 60 image on here, what I'm going to do is that you're going to take, when I bring that image up on the wall, we're looking through this one, and I'm going to say, that's the third one down on the left column on the left. Okay. I don't mention the price, but I put it up there and I tell them exactly where it is on that price list. And so they have the opportunity to be able to go through and look at it. So they can, at that point, they can make a decision to choose it or not choose it. You know, there's some situations where you get in there, and I've had women come in and they're like, we're going to pick stuff out, but my husband is under no circumstances is going to know how much any of the stuff costs. So we're just going to take and just avoid that situation. So then, then I wouldn't do it. But I always have it right in front of them. That is really critical. I think prices are much less if they're not spoken.
So, Ron, I know you're constantly, you're at the front end of ProSelect in that you're the one who's coming up with the ideas as to how you can help photographers to sell more, and to be more successful. And without giving away any secrets, is there, in the latest release of ProSelect, what have you released there that you believe is another game changer for photographers? And without giving away, what's your opinion on this virtual IPS? Because when we were all in lockdown or quarantine, I know like you came up with VIPS, virtual IPS, and on the think tank, and you were teaching photographers how to do it remotely using Zoom. What do you see now? Do you think that that's going to be something that's going to stay with us, or was it just for these times and it's all going to change again? What's your view on that?
Well, I think we've entered a whole new world out here, that the world is going to be different coming out of the COVID crisis than it was going in. And I think you're finding photographers that are deciding that, that doing a viewing session over Zoom is not that difficult, and the videos that I put together, I got a series of 3 videos on the Time Exposure website of how to set everything up for Zoom to be able to do a virtual IPS session. So I think what you have to do is that your business has to be based on adapting to the client, working within the comfort levels of the client. Now, I think that anytime that we can get together on a one-on-one, that's great. But having things like Zoom is great. The ability in ProSelect to be able to tap a keystroke and throw watermarks on all of your images right there for that Zoom session, so the client can't grab them or anything in there. That makes it there. We don't have to, we've eliminated a workflow process at the front end of putting watermarked images on and having to take them off. ProSelect just boom, pops that right on the screen. So I just think it's a matter of our businesses have to be flexible. I'm hearing restaurant owners going, you know what, I really like this takeout thing. It costs me a whole lot. I'm making more money than I am on takeouts than I was when I'm worrying about paying waiters and all the staff and the real estate. Office buildings are different. People have, all of a sudden, companies have realized that people can take and they can work remotely. They can work at home, and they're not paying $22 a square foot for office space. So we're evolving and adapting, and I think it can all just,
So Ron, I know as a past president of PPA, and you really believe in what PPA do, but you were mentioning to me before we came on that there's a really important event coming up where photographers can learn an awful lot.
Right, exactly. Well, as you did mention, I'm a past PPA president, so I'm a huge advocate for PPA, but being that means that I'm a huge advocate for photography in general, the business of photography and the legal rights of photographers. And these are all things that PPA stands for, that PPA's worked hard to do, that you can take and you can join PPA and you can say, well, it's not worth that money, but it comes down to the fact of what all you can really get involved with and what you can get out of it. And one of the things that's really important is photographic competition. I've been involved in photographic competition for, I think I had my first entry in maybe 1982. So it's been a long time that I've been doing that. And I've been a judge now for far too long, probably a long time. And this year we're having the International Photographic Competition. Everything's gotten shifted off because of COVID, but next week, the international competition, the whole thing is actually going to happen online because we couldn't all get together as a group. So it's going to be a new experience. Matter of fact, in another hour, I've got a meeting dealing with some of the testing, the technology for that one. But you can actually you can log in and you can watch the judging. There'll be 3 or 4 different judging rooms going on at one time. You can log into the different categories. You can watch, you can hear the comments from the judges. And it's a great way to learn. The photographic competition is something that, is it worth it from your marketing aspect? Yeah, okay, yeah, it's good. The master of photography, master artist, those are all great things, but they're primarily peer recognition. But they do set me apart from other photographers out there, okay, when I'm in the marketplace. People may not ask for a master photographer, but I can promote it. But the key is being a part of photographic competition as an entrant and getting the evaluations on my images has made me so much of a better photographer. Ronan knows I play with the best men and women in the world when it comes to photography, and it's amazing the images it create. But just about everybody that's a part of that pool has grown up in photographic competition and has grown and developed and perfected their craft. And that's what it allows you to do. So being able to take and log in, if you go to ppa.com, there'll be links out there to be able to log in and watch the competition. It's going, I think it's like from 8 to 5 Eastern time, US Eastern time, Sunday through it'll probably end about midday on Friday when it's going to be. I'm actually one of the jury chairmen, so I'll be working Wednesday through Friday out there on my panels and directing the panel. So it's a great experience, a lot of fun.
So I love that, Ron, experience and fun together. That's and expertise, those 3 things together, that sounds really good to me. So Ron, if I'm not a ProSelect user yet and I need to be, or I have a ProSelect that's an older version and I know it's time now to make that small investment to upgrade because I'm going to get payback probably on my first session. How do I find out more about ProSelect?
Well, first of all, you can go out. ProSelect's got kind of 2 websites. We've got timeexposure.com, which is the company. Okay, it's kind of like what Adobe is to Photoshop. But then we've also got ProSelect software. So if you're going out and you just want to get a good overview on what ProSelect is, what about it, what it costs, a simplified version, go to proselectsoftware.com, and you can take and you can learn about it there, and then you can download it. If you're a new trial user, one of the things that we've got that is just amazing is that we have what's called a mentor program. So you can download a trial, and then once you've activated a trial, you can get an invitation to be able to meet online with a mentor. Okay, now we say it's an hour-long session, but our mentors have never been able to keep it to an hour, so it's always going to be longer. And Maureen and Carol are the primary mentors, and they just do a fantastic job of working with you to be able to show you all that ProSelect has to offer. If you're out there evaluating any IPS software, I encourage you to go out there and take advantage of the mentor session. There's no obligation, it's no cost. They will teach you about doing IPS sessions, and they will show you how ProSelect can do it. It's not a hard sell. These gals, they don't sell anything. I mean, I shouldn't say they don't sell anything. I mean, obviously they're doing it, but it's our belief that once you really understand the product, you'll be just stunned. And so many people you'll be able to do, you get done with the session, and then the next day or so, you'll be able to do your first IPS session. And you will more than pay for the software in that next session if you just jump into it and just do it. And they step you through that process. So go out to proselectsoftware.com. We also have the Facebook group, and it's ProSelect user to user. Go out to there and you can ask questions. I monitor that group all the time, and there's lots of power users out there. So it's a fantastic place to be.
Great, Ron. Listen, we've gone over time, but I could listen and talk to you all night. Wow. Listen, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your expertise with us. And stay safe and healthy. Give Carol a big hug from Susan and I. I can't wait till we meet up again soon.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, tell Susan hello. Thanks, Ronan.
Take care, Ron.
All right.
Stay
Bye now.
safe. Bye, everybody.